It's 2,174 miles from Eufaula to Hollywood. We're about to talk to a homeboy who's made the trip to the big time.
You speak, we listen. Conversations connecting people. This is the Chuck Williams Show.
You know, they say everything is local. Well, we've got a National Football League general manager, and to me, it's a local story. We're joined by Les Sneed, general manager of the LA Rams, but like me, Les is just a good old boy from Eufaula, and Les, we really appreciate you coming in and talking to us today.
Oh, Jack to be here. Jack to be back in the South. You know, it's raining in Southern California today.
It's kind of chilly. It's raining?
It's raining.
It never rains in Southern
California.
It never rains in Southern California.
Oh, it's. I think 538 used the analogy that when Donald Trump won the election in 2016, he had about the same chance of winning that election as it is raining in Los Angeles, which seems like it was about maybe 12 days a year or something. It was an interesting number that 538 used that day.
You're
in that prediction.
You're a numbers guy. I mean, you make trades. You're a National Football League general manager. What are there? 32 of y'all, 32 jobs that you hold. But you're the only one from Eufaula and maybe the only one from Alabama. When somebody in California or wherever asks you to describe Eufaula, your hometown, what do you tell them?
Best thing, we're in Hollywood, so I could say maybe I could go Mayberry, but maybe not black and white, color.
Color version.
Maybe they added a couple of streets and paved the roads, but I think that would be how I'd relate it. I would always say it's probably bigger than Mayberry, but very similar in that, right? In Mayberry, a lot of people knew each other. They didn't get along, they didn't get along every moment, but at the end of the day, it seems like, everybody was trying to take care of each other. So
how did that small town environment nurture you to a career that very few could have predicted for anybody coming out of Eufaula?
I think it'd probably be geography, right? The small town happened to be located in South Alabama, and for some reason in the South, right, football is a priority, where maybe, in a small town in the Northeast, football might not be a priority. There may be another priority. So that we'd have to get into the history of how football became such a priority in the South. But, I think that's part of it. So when you set out to say, okay, I want to be a football player, maybe not a beach volleyball player, even though that seems like that might have been more fun. So, and then I do think at the end of the day, there's growing up in a small town, that environment where you had teachers, coaches, right? They cared, they poured their life. It was their life's calling. It was their life's mission, even though they had their life going on, their families, but right, they poured their heart and soul into developing young men and women.
Who were some of those?
That you go to that high school at the time, and I know there was probably some industry reasons, but we could write a book or a movie on where kids went to school from Eufaula, Alabama. Like, my story maybe in the end gets good, but early in the down, I didn't even make I wasn't even on the varsity. We had people going to Harvard, Yale, all the academies.
I was going to say the academies were going out of your place, out of Eufaula High. Y'all were producing. Eufaula High was producing quality people at that time. Really. They are today too. I don't take that wrong. But who were some of the people at Eufaula High who influenced you? I would suspect Coach Woodham, Mr. Quinney, the principal, those types of people would have been on the list.
Yeah, you definitely have to. Wayne Woodham still texts me today, still texts me win or lose. The only person who will text me when we lose 3 games in a row. I think that third loss, even Wayne was ready to jump off the bandwagon. He didn't really know what to say. It's interesting. Dennis Anderson. I was chatting with a group today, and I was talking about Dennis Anderson, and reason I bring up him, he was defensive line coach there, strength coach, but because he was our strength coach, he lived with us in the summer, gave us somewhere to go. It's interesting. I could mention Kay Whaley, who was an English teacher, and again, I was not a really good English student at all.
I'm stunned.
But she kept. I mean, I had to be one of the more stubborn people she's ever probably taught, but she kept working with me with the whole, let's call it mission, to prepare me for, to be successful when I got to the next level of the video game in the classroom, not necessarily just on the field. Kim Bush, who just retired, because I was friends with
pastor of First Baptist Church.
It's in the wild when one of your better friends' is dad's a pastor. So those are interesting moments at the dinner table per se. But I can't say because of his love to, love for people and develop them, that very meaningful. So I could go. I'm gonna miss names and now be an enemy.
But
you follow. But those are some of the ones that I think about a lot. I mean, the one that comes to mind, it's the late Pete Walker. He taught ag. Great story though. I was like, you know what? I knew I'd made what I needed to make on the ACT. I won't go public with it because it would be embarrassing. But I knew I was getting in at that point. Troy, I knew enough to know that I didn't have to take another class, and I was good. I'd met my minimum requirements. And so I go in and, unfortunately, single mom. So I say, you know what? It's over. No one can talk me out of it. So I'm going from, let's call it upper level math class to ag. And the first thing Pete, and I remember to this day, Pete Walker looked at me, said, Sneed, next year when you're in college, you're going to wish you to stayed in that, let's call it algebra 2, 3, I don't know, calculus class. You're going to wish you to stayed in that calculus class. But because you wanted, to be lazy, why don't you go pick up that welding machine over there and let's start welding? So I can tell you this, probably couldn't get away with it today, but now when he sends me over to a welding machine and I've never welded before, maybe the most scariest moment in my entire life is, holy cow, how do I crank this blowtorch up? And if it goes wrong, but the lesson was the lesson, and I remember it to this day.
There are a lot of lessons that both of us, you follow. I'm laughing as you tell the story. I'm going to Troy. I made what I need to make on the ACT. I ought to match ACT scores with you right now because I did the same thing. I made the decision I was going to Troy. I bombed the ACT the first time I took it, realized it was good enough to get in Troy, and I never went back and retook it. So I understand that whole philosophy very, very well.
But you would probably disagree with this, but I remember when a guy named Marty Williams would come back from Southern Miss, and you would see him doing his running on the football field, and we would be training there. You would train a little bit harder because, like, okay, we want to be like Marty. We want to be snapping the ball to Brett Favre, that type thing. So there's many, and you can explain to the viewers who Marty is.
For full disclosure, Marty's my baby brother. No, he was always bigger than I was physically, but he played for Southern Miss and was Brett Favre's center his senior year that Brett was a freshman at Southern Miss. So pretty good. And they remain friends to this day, I believe. And he used to go to a lot of Packer games. Want to get into, I've got a friend of yours in here right now. I've got Archie Grubb. You and Archie grew up not far from each other. And I want to talk about the first real formative football experience for you. And I need Archie to help me with this. Tell me what the Backyard Football League was, and then we'll bring Archie in quickly.
Oh, Backyard Football League. Wow. Archie's really good with words.
He's a lawyer.
You had to live that. I would butcher this. When I try to tell people about the Backyard League, they can't comprehend it. You had to live it. But, I mean, if I said anything, I don't know how it got done, but we built locker rooms we had full pads, and they were high school helmets from schools from the Wiregrass. Don't know how we got them. Sure, it was legal. Sure, it was above water. All of that, and somehow the most amazing thing is that, you know how in the good old days when you would, yeah, whatever, let's call it Columbus paper, Dothan, whatever they were, would give their honor roll, whatever good high school moments for the weekend. Like, I'm in maybe 7th grade, and I made the, let's call it Columbus, whatever, honor roll. And again, when I'm actually really playing football, as a junior, senior, I actually made the same honor roll. So again, don't know how Frank Mixon got that done. Don't know how we got those pads, but we literally had an ecosystem. It was engineered, should be a movie. And we went full pads back there. Not all the time were full pads, but there were some, we probably covered all sports. It wasn't just football, but
and this
it was a well-designed league.
This was neighborhood kids. Archie, tell me what the neighborhood, I mean, people that drive through Eufaula know these neighborhoods well because they're in the heart of the city.
Well, Chuck, if you're coming from Columbus headed down to the beach or wherever on Highway 431, you're going right through the heart of downtown Eufaula, and that's where we grew up. And Les lived right down there. I was down there. The Mixon family, who was at the center of all this, was right there. And we basically had the run of the downtown on our bikes, and from all hours of the day with very limited parental supervision. It was not quite like Charlie Brown, but pretty close. And we did our own thing, and our thing was playing sports all year round.
How good, Archie, this for you, how good, did you realize in the 7th grade that Les was headed to be a general manager of a National Football League team?
Not in the 7th grade, but, Les had a pretty remarkable transformation, maybe starting right about that time from 7th grade to about 9th grade, where I think he had some middle school coaches that really had a good influence on him. And Dr. Ken Bush that he mentioned, I think, is one of them, where Les really worked hard while we were still kind of loafing around, and really, he changed his body, and his work habits were tremendous. And it was pretty apparent by the time he was, in 9th grade, I'd say, that he was going to be successful at football. And then I think he, those habits carried over at some point into what, his study and academic, and then on through into college and into work, just a really strong work ethic that I think has led to his success today.
You really did marry the weight room as a upper middle schooler or early high school, Les, didn't you? You spent a lot of time in the weight room.
Oh yeah, I lived there, so that was and still to this day it's some form of, let's call it exercise, exertion is something I do daily. Rarely take a day off, so I naturally really loved it. The endorphins you get from it, but the community that was involved in those moments in those summer, and that's where I mentioned Dennis Anderson somewhere when Wayne came. I probably was in 9th grade, so really instituted a, probably before its time, strength conditioning program that was relatively simple but demanding and consistent. And from there, obviously when you're a young teenager and you can see, right, there's measurement weekly the way he did it, right? You either knew you were getting stronger or staying the same the way he did it, because whatever you did a week later, you had to do 5 pounds more.
Were you motivated to get stronger?
Oh, definitely. There was that was natural, and probably somewhere along the way genetically, I would say gifted enough that I was able to get strong, because some people can really, really work hard and not get as strong. But I was able to measure and feel and see the gains.
Do you work out? I guess you worked out in the Eufaula High weight room as a kid. Do you work out in the Rams weight room now? Will you go down and work out in the team weight room some now?
I do, and probably didn't know then. It'd be interesting if Archie would have felt this, but I've come to realize that age 50 that I'm introverted. So there is this element of dealing with a lot of people daily that now I like to disappear and work out maybe somewhere. I have a place in my garage, so that way I can do it away from people, where if I go to our weight room, there's still an element. You got to put on the GM costume and still be the GM. And I'm a lot weaker now, so embarrassing in there.
Hey Chuck, I've got a story on that. When I went up to stay with Les one time, this is when he was with the Falcons, and spend the night with him. And, great to visit with Les, but it was one of the more subpar spend the night experiences, because Les went to bed at 8 p.m. because he was determined he was going to get up at 4 a.m. and go to the Falcons facility and work out, and then be at his desk, by 5:30 in the morning. And that was his routine, I think, for all the time he was with the Falcons, is he was going to bed early, getting up early, getting his workout in, where you're not going to get me out of bed at 4 in the morning to do a workout.
It's hard.
Yeah, and that's what successful people do. It's not by accident.
Did your mom play a role, Les, in instilling that work ethic in you? I know your mom is a very, very hardworking, tough woman. Did she instill some of that work ethic in you?
Yeah, she's probably working at the Shorter Mansion as we're recording this.
Yeah.
So when she's working now, and whenever you hit play to play it, she'll be working there. She'll be doing something for that mansion. So, and she did that her entire life. Again, as Archie said, we were fortunate to be in a town where you could be raised by the community, and your parents could go work or play, whatever they did. But I know my mom was always working. So two things: there's probably some element of genetics that were passed to me, and then there's definitely the socialization of seeing that every day. Hey, if you show up every day and put in a good day's work, it's going to work out.
I know you're across the country away from your mom, but she's been battling cancer for a while.
She's still working at the Shorter.
And still working. I mean, your mom is tough as nails. Pam Sneed. Do you, being a son who's that far away from her, do you feel like, how do you try to sort of help her in this cancer fight she's in, when you're as far away as you are? I know she visits you some and you visit her, but COVID screwed a lot of stuff up too.
Definitely. It's interesting because I'm relatively stoic in these situations, and it's one where we've talked about, even though there's been hard days, I have felt, and probably have a theory, right, that even when you're going through something like that, and the positive thing is her version of cancer is something you can live with and somewhat defeat, but there's definitely some moments of fatigue. But there is that element, right, where that's at the end of the day, that's reality. That's the card you pulled out of the deck that day, and probably didn't want to pull it out. But so there's this moment of, you know what, you still have one life to live, go live it. And she's still, even though it's work, I do think there is an element of that community at the Shorter Mansion where she's at, and her friends, have helped her get through it. So I'll try to, at least when I'm commuting home, give her a call. That she'll tell you I don't call enough, but I definitely try to give her that call and just chat. And really she can answer the phone and she tells me what's going on in Eufaula. And I have found that the negative of a small town, like, it's awesome when you're young, because like everyone know and they're raising you, but as you get older, I mean, it's like, okay, it's inevitable, right? Someone's going to die every week. I'm like, I said, that is tough to go through. How do y'all do that down there?
I'm going through that with my parents.
You can die in LA and it's, you were just a small star in the universe, if that. But in a small town, it's like once a week, somebody that, so I get the Eufaula scoop when I give her a call.
Yeah, and it is scoop. I want to shift gears a little bit and go to football. You were with the Falcons, then you got hired by the Rams as a GM. You got to be getting close to one of the longest tenured GMs in the NFL right now, right?
I think the answer is yes. I couldn't give you where I rank, but I know going into this is the 10th season, so
GMs,
probably in the top 5. If there's
GMs,
32 GMs, I would say there's maybe 8, depending on. Technically, Jerry Jones is a GM. I like Martin Jones. So there's when you add people like Jerry Jones and Bill Belichick in there, then it may be about 8 of us or 8 that may be ahead of me, but I'm in the top 10 for sure.
how do you survive in what is got to be a cutthroat business? How do you survive a decade in that job?
Exercise is important. You certainly don't. I call it. You don't read a lot about sports. You don't watch it. But at the end of the day, I think at the end of the day, really, you gotta have a reason of why you're in it on the day to day, and not just the result of a win or a loss to stay in it. And those are going to evolve over time, but you better have that aligned because the emotions of the result are going to weigh a lot, and the emotions of a negative result really, really weigh a lot. So you definitely have to be intentional with that aspect of emotions, thinking how you think about things, and why you're in it to begin with. If, as an example, we didn't keep score and there wasn't a winner or a loser on a weekly basis. Then the other thing is, you know what, you got to be competitive and courageous. And when I say courageous, don't be scared to try things, to be innovative, because in a 32 team league where there's 32 bright organizations, I was listening to a podcast this morning, and Daryl Morey, who was the Houston Rockets GM, and now he's with the 76ers. But he was, he's an MIT grad, so he brought a lot of the analytics in it. But he was like when you're trying to be one of 30, and he used the word, probably the NASCAR thing. Hey, if you're not first, you're last, right?
The whole Ricky Bobby.
Everyone should be making, there you go. Everyone should be making big bets, because it is hard to get an edge in this. And when you get to a level of where when you're fortunate enough to get to a point where you actually can contend, it can be, you got to take advantage of it. It can be more fulfilling, because at that point you don't necessarily have to make huge, but you can move the needle in increments and get an advantage. But it's hard getting to the point where you're consistently winning.
Do you watch the ESPN talking heads? Do you read the LA Times sports columnists? Do you listen to the people that can sometimes be critical of people like you?
I don't, but here's what I say is, I'll probably spend more time reading other things. So I really appreciate reading. All of my teachers and you follow would not understand how that occurred. So with that being said, if I'm going to spend time reading, I like to read, books, and really trying to, let's call it, garner some type of wisdom that maybe we can synthesize over to football, and how to, help us get a cutting edge. Now, with that being said, with ESPN, with our LA columnists, we have relationships. I'm well aware at times of what's being said, what's not, which that's pretty easy to grasp, right? If we got a 3-game losing streak, I'm well aware that it's probably tilted negative. If you're winning, it's positive. So everyone has a job to do. What I don't do, and I think is very helpful, is get into let's call it the Twitter world, where everyone has a voice, and everyone should have a voice, or could, but it's just, wow, you're just getting pounded with it, right? So I really feel bad for our young players, young people in the business, because I always say that's not real life. That's, if we call it the metasphere, you can walk out one of our better players can walk and go eat after a loss in a restaurant and actually have a good dinner. Someone may come up asking for autograph, right? But that same player may go on his Twitter account, and if he dropped the ball that day, he may be full of just, you're the worst, you know.
And a lot of that depends on who owns who in a fantasy football league.
Oh yeah, so
it's crazy. It's crazy. I'm gonna put you on the spot real quick. I'll get back to football, but you.
So I'll help the SEC coaches and fans out. You be realistic down there. I mean,
they can't
be. I mean, the expectation. I mean, when I say that is the SEC. When I see, it's like European soccer, right? You could be a really good team last year and lose 4 really good players, and for some reason, the expectations is that team should be exactly the same as it was the year before. And so my SEC fans like, all right, just take a step back and act like you're a little league coach, and your 4 best hitters moved on from T-ball to whatever the next level, and now you're starting over with guys that can't even. You see what I'm saying?
I get it.
So I'm trying to help the SEC.
So who you think?
Now, Archie down there will get. He's at Alabama, so it's, you know.
You evaluate talent. You evaluate coaches. As part of your job, do you think we'll ever see another coach like Nick Saban?
That's the math says no way, right? To do what he's done. So I would always bet the under on that one. You know, there's going to be, and it's interesting too. Wow, and you're seeing a little bit with changes too. As a younger generation, I think here's what's going to probably change things right there. Will there be movement? And I know Nick moved around as well, Michigan State, LSU to Alabama, but you're seeing the younger coaches make a move. And I think sometimes it's a healthy move because there is an element of shelf life. And wow, I can't keep doing it here, right? So when you do make a move, there's a breath of fresh air. Maybe you're starting something. There's a building instead of having to win it all. And I do think the money involved now makes it a little bit easier for the younger coaches, right, to say, you know what, that's a pretty stressful, pressure-ridden job, and I'll just go to the lake. And they can afford to go to the lake, per se. So I would bet the under on that. Nick's done some rare things in college football.
If you call Nick Saban, a Kirby Smart, a Lincoln Riley, and you ask them about the evaluation of a player y'all are looking at in the draft or somebody they may have coached down the road, are those guys, do they take the call, and what are those conversations like?
Well, usually when Nick calls, it's usually, so Linda Leone's his administrative assistant, and I know Linda for many years, and usually I see Linda call and I go, oh geez, and she'll set up a call with Nick, and he basically rips you for actually liking his young players that may have eligibility left and he'd rather stay. So that's usually how that call goes. But they're all very, very. What's interesting, I think, is different than some programs. Nick's been very open with the NFL, right? Like, come in. And oh, by the way, we're gonna let everyone know who you are and who you consistently are, and we're just going to tell them the truth. So I think that's a neat thing that he does, which probably motivates his players to evolve. Because again, they're all young, right? They get there at 18, you leave at 20, 21, 22. So there's going to be an element of maturation, but those guys are very, very helpful.
Are you surprised? Are you surprised with the success Alabama quarterbacks are having in the league?
You know what? It's interesting. I would say no, because they are. And I think what Nick has done, and he's evolved a little bit, but there is still an element of pro style to his offenses. There's an element that you definitely have to be on top of things from a mental standpoint. So that's one of the harder transitions, and is getting here in the verbiage involved and what is required of the QB. that the QB actually has to figure out, has to process. So I can easily, I can look back and go, it's not necessarily right a surprise. Like Mac Jones was a guy that distributed the football, even though he had weapons that were first rounders and then backups who are going to be first rounders, but he distributed the football based on what the coverage was dictating. He was anticipatory, so you could feel that he's going to have a chance to be successful in our leagues. That's what QBs are required to do.
Let's talk about the Rams. Y'all right now beat the Jaguars last week. You can tell when this was taped. Yet to end a 3-game losing streak. 3-game losing streaks have to be tough in the NFL. You have to feel like they're never going to end.
Well, the 3-game losing streak with a bye week in there, so you go over 30 days, go over a month without a win. So that's where you have to have an ironclad emotional control. Can't ruminate on the results. And we like to say it, and it's easy to comprehend, right? Whether we'd have won 2 out of 3, lost 3, won 3, at the end of the day, we had set ourselves up where the final 7 games were going to determine the rest of the story. So point being, the ruminating on negative results definitely can't compound into those next 7 games. So that's everyone. I mean, the Patriots started 2-4. Now they're the 1 seed in the AFC. So they would have ruminated on 2-4 and not the rest of the season. They might not be where they are today. So that's where the ironclad emotional control has to come into play. And it definitely takes cognitive training to be able to go through that, because it's a long season.
Ironclad emotional control in the NFL, does that start in the GM's office? I mean, if you are vacillating, if you're on a roller coaster, does that transfer down to the coaches, the coaching staff, and eventually into the locker room?
I definitely think, whether it's GM, whether it's head coach, even ownership, depending on, each organization's ecosystem is different. Quarterback, there's certain players, right? When you're going through 1 loss, 2 losses, whatever, there is that element where, today when you walk in the building, right, people are going to be looking at you, right, in your body language, and in our case, our body language of a few certain people that it's going to be contagious of how everyone, right, responds to that loss and goes about their daily excellence.
You talked a little bit about this at the start, about being a Southern guy, and talked about the South. Your head coach obviously has deep Southern roots as well, Sean McVay. Does the fact that y'all kind of are from the same part of the country allow y'all to work together well? Is that just, it is what it is?
That's a really good question. Had never thought about it. I mean, it definitely, we definitely can relate to each other, right? Being, he grew up in Atlanta, and I spent a lot of times in Atlanta. So definitely know his world, his
dad's a Hall of Fame broadcaster from Atlanta. I mean,
definitely. So, and didn't know this, but he was a big part of the Falcons when I was with the Falcons, but didn't know that at the time. So I do think that helps us relate. But at the end of the day, we share similar core beliefs, and probably, and this could be somewhat, although we could say maybe there is some arrogant people in the South, but from a standpoint of growing up in the South, we're probably naturally humble, appreciative of how the heck did we even get to these chairs, and realizing it took a lot of people to get us to these chairs. And so now it transcends to how we live, right? We utilize the people that are around us and try to inspire them to do right, to dominate their role, as we call, because they all have skill sets that we don't, and all of that, right? All of that bundles up and compounds to success.
What kind of decision goes in to essentially hiring a quarterback, a team leader who his talent's never been, or nobody's ever argued Matt Stafford didn't have talent, but he had not been successful in Detroit. What do you do in your office and in your mindset? How do you get to a point where you're willing to put your team and your future and everything with Matt Stafford? How do you get to that point as a GM?
Well, in that case, right, it's what a lot of people go through, especially with quarterbacks, right? Person in the situation, and they both carry some version of weight, right? Situation and Matt's Detroit versus ours, right? In Matt's case, Matt, and so number one, QB is very, very important in football, as we talked about. If I was betting money, and I won't, it was one of the reasons I felt like Alabama would have a chance against Georgia, right? Georgia's got an unbelievable D, but because Alabama's QB is more than likely going to win the Heisman, and he earned that. I mean, that drive against Auburn, 97 yards in however many minutes. Not everyone can do that. He did it that day on that stage with a lot to lose and not a lot of room for error. So I think because quarterback's very important, we spend a lot of resources trying to figure out, right, how do we get the best person right for our moment in time, and that's where we've been someone that's been contending. So being able to get a Matt Stafford who, while the experience he has, I always say this, it was almost allowing Sean to partner right with a peer and not necessarily be a teacher.
They're not far apart in age, are they?
Not very far apart at all.
As you look at this kind of end run,
you know what, I got to say this though, Chuck, right? I mean, Archie's there and we're talking about backyard football. It was like Paul Mixon in the backyard. I mean, he was Aaron Rodgers of the backyard league.
Yeah.
I mean, if you could get him on your team.
Yeah, Paul Mixon was definitely the Tom Brady, and then you switch over to basketball, he's the Michael Jordan or whatever of the backyard league for sure.
That's interesting that you spun it back to the backyard football league in Eufaula. I mean, because to me that's fascinating. Here you are at the top of the game, one of the top jobs in the country for a sports executive. But you don't forget that you came out of a backyard football league off of 431 South. I mean, that's nuts to me.
Oh, and the fields, right? They're not like SoFi Stadium or Bryant Denny or Jordan Hare, right? It was
Jane Simms's backyard, right?
But no, you got the backstory is we were actually destroying her beautiful backyard that probably in her world, right, was preparing for the pilgrimage all year, but we were destroying it on a weekend basis. But yes, that is definitely a legendary field, and you got to think about. I mean, I don't know. I mean, in today's time, especially in California, if my kids went to a neighbor's yard and played a full-fledged football game, I mean, I don't know if they get out of that thing. I hate to say a lot, but the sacrifice she made for us, that's unbelievable.
I don't know that anyone ever asked permission, Les, whether from her or then the Grady family who had the other yard. We don't even know the Grady's. We just started playing football in their yard, and there's nothing they could do about it, really.
Who was the best player? You said you had Paul Mixon was Aaron Rodgers. Who else was in that? I mean, I guess Randall Wilder was in that league. Who are some of the others? I can name off some kids.
Randall? When you brought up Randall Wilder's name, I'm thinking he had to be like. I'm trying to think of the guy was the glue guy for the Warriors. Not Steph Curry, but you wanted Randall Wilder on your basketball team. You were going to get offensive rebounds. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Randall was kind of the Draymond Green of the the backyard basketball aspect. But it's funny, Chuck and Les, we had kids from 6 to 16 out there doing sports, dressing out in locker rooms that we made ourselves out of like all kind of scrap wood that we found, and it was really a unique experience.
Oh yeah, Cody Sparks out, and then when there was a guy named Tim Dollar, I think he went to the Naval Academy, but I do remember he wasn't like the part of the regular game, but when he showed up, you didn't want to tackle him.
No, you didn't want to mess with
him. Don't get in his way.
But, even before y'all, Eufaula has always been like that. I don't know if y'all know Herbert Green, but Herbert Green was a basketball player at Auburn, had basketball coach at Columbus State. And he grew up on Sanford Street right there near the old high school. And 7 straight years, that street produced an all-state of Alabama basketball player.
Wow.
Eufaula, Billy Rayleigh, Booth, all these guys came off of that street. Eufaula's always sort of had the workman's attitude. From an athletic standpoint, Eufaula's a blue-collar town athletically, but it's always had good athletes, right?
Yes. And it seems like still does in a sense.
Yeah, Jarrell Jernigan, Courtney Upshaw. You got guys now that have played in the league or playing in the league that came out of Eufaula. There's a kid now that's signing with somebody I saw today. I can't remember who it is, but they're there. We got to get close to wrapping this up, but I want to go back to Eufaula for one thing. Archie and I were talking about this before the podcast. We were trying to come up with the most famous person out of Eufaula. Rick Lingo and I actually had this conversation a couple of weeks ago. And Rick's of my generation, not yours, but I think you know who he is. And Rick and I were having a conversation. And Rick said, I think Les is probably the most famous person to come out of Eufaula. And Archie said maybe Admiral Thomas Moore, Admiral Moore Middle School. He was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But, how does it feel to be in the discussion of one of the most famous people to come out of your hometown?
Well, it's interesting when I've Wikipedia at one time, it seems like you had the Marilyn McCoo, and there was some element of Michael Jackson's mom that may have spent time there. Again, I can't I don't want to, Wikipedia, it's probably relatively accurate, but can't necessarily say I can confirm that. So I'm going to put some of them up in there. You know what? It's probably like Archie said earlier. Well, he gave me some nice compliments. I don't think when you're a little kid, two things. I don't think you ever think about you're going to ever be in that discussion. Maybe you have some dreams and you hope, but you probably don't really believe them. And really, if you didn't meet them, it's not like life's over, right? You didn't really, that's not what you were aspiring for to begin with. So I'm still Les Sneed in the backyard. And when I'm sitting here with Archie, I'm still that guy. And there will be times when I don't even think that, okay, I'm general manager of an NFL team.
You're a 50-year-old guy. You've been very successful. You've been in a Super Bowl. You may have a shot at another Super Bowl this year. Are you still a Eufaula boy, even though you're Hollywood now?
You know what, Chuck? You're just like, all the media. Can't we have a shot next year too, and the year after? Seems like it's all, you're going with the narrative this year. 2022 is important too.
Hey, do you have any draft picks left? I've been watching your trades. You've been trading a lot of draft picks, man.
Oh yeah, that's where we're at. We're kind of in the contention phase, so you got to take, as we talked earlier, we could go on for days on that. But for where we're at right now, veterans could be better than younger, but you definitely have to have a mix of both. And there will be a moment when Aaron Donald, decides to retire, and you go, okay, we'll never have one of those again. That might have been the greatest defensive player to ever play, and that was a heck of a run and things like that. But I forgot your original question when I
Are you still are you
tapped your journalistic, motive.
Hey, I learned my journalism from Joel Smith, buddy. That's why I go back to Mr. Joel, the longtime editor.
Now you know what? That's good. That we could go for days on that. Is because I mean when you write an editorial for let's call it a small town newspaper, and you have to be somewhat critical, which I'm sure he was at times.
He was.
But I mean, you talk about courage now. I mean, that's you got to live amongst.
You got to go to the Rotary Club. You got to go to the Holiday Inn for breakfast. I mean, it takes courage to criticize your hometown. But you're still a Eufaula boy. You'll always be a Eufaula boy, right?
Oh, there's no doubt. That's home.
Home's where the heart is, they say. We're going to wrap this up, but one thing I do want to do is I've done this with every guest I've done. I've done almost 40 of these now. I call it turn the tables, and this ought to be fun for you. You're the guy that gets all the questions asked to you by the media. Ask me a question. Anything you want to ask me, or would you rather to ask it to one of the LA Times guys?
Oh, that's a good. I should have been. You should have. I wish I'd have known this. I would have prepared. So you know what what I would ask is this, right? You said you learned from Joel Smith. For some reason, right, this was your life's calling. You were gonna, be a journalist, cover stories. So the interesting thing would be, hey, what was the most impactful thing you covered that you didn't expect to be impactful? That maybe more impacted you personally.
I'll
you
actually
went to it. You weren't expected.
I'll actually tie this to the NFL a little bit. I covered the gender integration of the U.S. Army Ranger School in 2015. The first women to earn Ranger tabs in the U.S. Army. 3 of them earned them. Shay Haver, Kristen Greist, and Lisa. God, I just went brain dead. Lisa's going to kill me. Oh man, and she could.
Do not make a Ranger.
But Shay Haver graduated in the same high school class with RG3. She was probably a better athlete than he was. And they earned this Ranger tab, and I got to watch it all the way through. General Scott Miller allowed me an embed with the Washington Post, New York Times, and Christian Science Monitor, and I got to see 3 women change the most hardcore men's opinion of, we don't want special favors. You tell me what the standard is, and I'll go meet the standard. And they set a standard, and it became a standards-based deal, and they achieved it. They earned the Ranger tab, and they're getting close to 100 women graduating now 6 years later. They really did change Army history for women. And, I think at the end of the day, whether we're man or woman, all we want is a shot. Give us a shot. Tell me what the standards are, and I'll meet. I mean, it's what you deal with every day. You got a standard. You know what the standard is. You know how many wins you need. You know what you need on your roster. And there are other people that can do that, and you know that. Does that make any sense, Les?
I could feel what I did? I could feel the emotion and passion of right. And I could even. It inspired me, right?
Oh man,
just that story.
Don't go trade anybody today for that, though.
It was at Fort Benning.
Yeah, it was at Fort Benning. It was also down at Eglin and Destin and up in the mountains of Dahlonega. So it was in 3 places. It is the most rigorous training in the U.S. Army. It is designed to mentally and physically break you. It is designed to take you to a point where you have to make decisions under the most harsh emotional, mental, and physical duress. No sleep. I mean, food deprivation, everything you can think of is part of this course. And when they come, I mean, you got one guy in the NFL that's a Ranger that I know of, and it's the big tackle. He used to be at Pittsburgh, Villanueva.
Right.
He actually is a U.S. Army Ranger. He's the biggest one I've ever seen. Most of those guys are 5'10", 5'10", 6 foot, built like, I mean, just mental and physical specimens. And, you know, we're fortunate in our community of Columbus to have a lot of those guys that live around us, and they're true American heroes.
I got one. We'll go a little bit longer.
Okay,
I get that
you're the one that's got to go do work. I'm good.
But so when you're on a 3-game losing streak, Archie, and you're like, okay, I don't want to say this but my thought was, okay, I'd rather go try to be a Ranger, even though I would miserably fail, right? But because I'm losing my ironclad emotional control. But you were in competitive sports, coaching basketball. What do you miss most? Even though I'm sure you could articulate the headaches.
Well, I'll tell you.
To inspire those of us still involved and going through losing streaks, per se.
Well, first of all, on the Ranger part, I had a neighbor in Columbus that won the best Ranger competition one year. But Les, I think you could you're a little over the hill now, but back in the day, I think you could have definitely pulled it off. You know, I miss just a lot of the relationships that you have through sports and a team and working towards a common goal. My boys are playing high school basketball, so I can live some of that through them now, and that's fun. And I live it through you and watching what you do. It's amazing. And, you know, we're all big Rams fans in our house. Even our dog has a Rams jersey. And, you know, we watch this on the Sunday ticket. We watch the Rams games, and we, you know, we sink or swim with you. So it's pretty cool.
Eufaula probably is a Rams town, isn't it? I mean, there are a lot of people in Eufaula pulling for you and the Rams, right, Les?
You know, that I bet you Eufaula for a town in the South probably has more Rams fans. But analytically, we could probably really figure out who actually did what Archie did and subscribed to the NFL ticket, so he's not stuck watching your partner's Falcons down there.
That's the only reason.
Who actually bought the subscription to watch the Rams? Then I bet you the numbers shrink a little bit.
You can get it on Red Zone. Red Zone, you'll get, at least we know when you're about to score. Last thing I'll ask and wrap it up. You've lived an amazing life for a guy that came out of Eufaula. What's the thing as we're in this Christmas and holiday season, Les, what are you most thankful for?
I think thankful for, I'll go back to what Archie said. It's the relationships, right, that you have. And I'm introverted, so that could lead to Archie saying maybe I could have, right, passed muster with that Ranger stuff back in the day. But I think whether it's with your kids, whether it's with your mom, whether it's actually getting on this Zoom call with you, Chuck, Archie, and right, we don't talk every day. We text every now and then, but I can get on this call and it feels like we're just having a chat back home, right? So, you know, I think that's that's what's worth living for. That's where you get fulfilled. And so if I had one thing to be thankful for, it's the relationships and all of them. And if I got really deep, how they all compound. How everybody's life is a wonderful life. If we go to the Christmas movie, it's a wonderful life, right? If we all somehow regressed, analyzed our life, and if Archie hadn't have been the point guard in the backyard league, or we didn't use football cards to draft, or Marty Williams never went to play at Southern. You just never know if one of those people were deleted from the game, would your path have done something else? So
that's an interesting way to look at it. Well, this is the time I've got to wrap up and say the Chuck Williams Show can be heard Tuesday nights on WRBL.com. It's from 7 to 8. You can also catch it on Spotify, Apple, and iHeart. Is that right, Dylan? Dylan Hanson, our director, he's been outstanding, always is. Then on social media, you don't know anything about social media, do you, Les? Chuck, you on Twitter?
I have teenagers, so I'm aware.
Twitter at Chuck Williams, Facebook Chuck Williams WRBL, and then Instagram Chuck Williams 09 My guest has been Les Sneed. Les is the general manager of the Los Angeles Rams in the National Football League. Hollywood guy now, but his roots are very, very deep and firmly planted in Eufaula, Alabama. I want to thank Les for joining us and hope you'll be back here next week for another edition of the Chuck Williams Show. Thanks, guys.